Ubisoft has had some pretty major balancing flaws over the years. Whether it be Lion, Ella, Glaz, or even Legion, they all released in an overpowered state. However, the operator we are talking about today, some would argue was released more broken than any of them. This operator's gadget allowed them to bypass core gameplay mechanics and to win every gunfight they got involved in. That operator being Blackbeard. For the purpose of our story today, we will need to go back to Operation Dustline. Dustline released to the Siege community as our second season on May 10th, 2016. This operation brought us a new map in the form of Border, Valkyrie as our new defender, and Blackbeard as our attacker. Despite what you may think, Border was loved at the time of its release, and as for Valkyrie, she has been a great operator throughout Siege's history, and she has maintained that status even today. But on release, she was even stronger. She came with 4 cameras that could be thrown outside for free intel. Her primary was the MPX, which had low recoil, allowing her to hit easy headshots, and she had a nitro cell that allowed her to take full advantage of her cameras to get free kills. But despite her releasing in such a strong state compared to what she is today, she was still outshined by Blackbeard. Blackbeard's gadget was a rifle-mounted shield that, when mounted on a Scar, would protect his head from bullets. The shield had 800 HP, making it capable of stopping an entire shotgun magazine or even an SMG magazine. This allowed Blackbeard to rappel on windows or to play behind head glitches without any risk of dying, and while his Scar wasn't great, he still was able to win gunfights just by getting carried by his shield. I think it is pretty easy to see how this was a major flaw. Being able to bypass one of Siege's core and most important gameplay mechanics without any real downside is a problem. Pro players and content creators immediately started pointing out his strength, which led Ubisoft into looking for a way to balance him. Their first of many attempts would come in Operation Skull Rain. Operation Skull Rain released on August 2nd, 2016. This operation brought us the typical new content that we were used to. We got Favilla as our new map, Caveira as our defender, and Capitao as our attacker. However, what pro players, content creators, and players at the higher ranks were most happy about was the Blackbeard nerf. This nerf made Blackbeard's shield have an HP of 150, but he was given access to 2 of them. They were hoping it would put him in a dilemma where he had to decide whether to switch to a different shield or to try to make the other shield last longer by continuing to use the damaged one. But in reality, his shield still had way too much health, allowing him to easily win gunfights and then switch to a healthy shield without even thinking. Now, don't get me wrong, this was a big nerf and it was a step in the right direction, but it didn't have near the impact that Ubisoft were hoping for. He was still being used a ton in high-level play and was incredibly infuriating to go up against. Some new and inexperienced players claimed that this just made his second shield useless because he would die before getting to use it, and while this was an opinion held by a lot of the community, the stance just came from inexperience because anyone at the high-level play knew this was a problem. Well, lucky for the high-level players, Ubisoft would nerf him again in the next operation, that being Operation Red Crow. Red Crow was released on November 17th, 2016. This happens to be my favorite operation of year 1. It brought us the new map, Skyscraper, which would eventually become hated by most of the Siege community, but the 2 new operators were loved, those being Echo and Habana. They fit the Siege roster perfectly and added a ton of depth to Siege's gameplay, but obviously what we are here for today is the nerf to Blackbeard. This nerf lowered each of his shield's HP from 150 to 60, and they made his ADS speeds while his shield was up significantly slower. The goal of the nerf was to make it harder for him to play aggressively with the shield due to its slower ADS speeds, and this worked. Blackbeard wasn't being used aggressively anymore, and he was being used more so on window repels, but his shield health was still a bit of a problem. The 60 HP was enough for you to win one gunfight easily with it up, and it still gave you a huge advantage over other players. At this point, the majority of the Siege community realized that Blackbeard's issues were more ingrained than what a simple nerf could fix, but Ubisoft wouldn't change anything further until they decided to give Blackbeard a small nerf in Operation Parabellum. Parabellum is my favorite season of all time. It brought Villa into the game, which is one of my favorite maps, and it added 2 defenders onto the Siege roster, Maestro being an anchor with a fast fire rate LMG and a turret that can deny the plant, and Alibi being a roamer with an amazing gun and a gadget unlike anything we'd ever seen. On top of it all, we got a rework to Clubhouse that made it a much better map to play. As for Blackbeard, he got a super slight nerf in this patch. His shield's health was reduced by another 10 HP, and the speed penalty that he got while his shield was equipped was reduced. The reduced penalty on his movement was to make his speed more in line with other shield operators, and the damage nerf was intended to make his shield a little more fair to go against, but it ended up doing nothing. He would still be considered strong by the majority of pro players and content creators until he would eventually get nerfed one last time, and this one would be the nail in the coffin. Operation Crimson Heist brought us a map rework to Border, and for our new operator, we got Flores. This operation wasn't great, but the Blackbeard nerfs that were brought into this patch may have finally killed him as a strong pick. Ubisoft decided to go ahead and give his gun the banhammer by reducing its damage by 9. This made his assault rifle one of the worst weapons out of all the attackers, but to add salt in the wound, they nerfed his shield's HP once again by 30. This meant that his shields were only capable of stopping 1 bullet before being destroyed. This was bad news for Blackbeard and has resulted in him now being considered one of the worst operators in the game. Considering the way he was on launch, this is quite a drastic difference. The community is now begging Ubisoft to give him the same treatment as Tachanka got and rework him. Some ideas have been proposed which I actually think would work quite well. The first one is a rework idea by Zeman, and her idea is to give Blackbeard his own drones called Macaw drones. He gets 3 of them, one being activated during the prep phase and the rest being deployed throughout the round. These drones would have the ability to fly above the ground and land on high, hard to reach locations. I think these would be useful for clearing rooms in a pinch or to set up stationary cams in places other operators can't. The other rework I have seen is from Kudos's video. This idea is a rework to Blackbeard's shields themselves. It would change their shape from this to this. The goal is to make gunfights more fair while Blackbeard is facing you, but the side of his head would still be protected. This would help him while rappelling on windows by making him only vulnerable to what he is looking at. Obviously, for this to work, the HP on his shields would need to increase, and I also think that the shields should stay transparent, but this would be the perfect way to balance him in my eyes. It allows him to keep the shield that has made him who he is, but it makes him much more fair to go against. I think if anyone is going to get a rework in the near future, I think Ubisoft should focus on him. In conclusion, Blackbeard started out completely overpowered. His shield had 800 HP, which made it nearly impossible to headshot him, and his gun was much stronger than it is today. But throughout the seasons, his gun has been nerfed to the ground, and his shields are now about as effective as cardboard when it comes to stopping bullets. You can easily die to a well-placed burst into your shield while playing Blackbeard. This shows how bad his situation has shifted. He went from being infuriating to go against to now being infuriating to play. We will have to see how everything plays out for him over the coming seasons. Maybe Ubisoft will give him the rework he deserves so that he can finally become balanced. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, I would appreciate it if you would consider subscribing. We are slowly climbing to that 4K mark, and your sub could make a difference. Also, if you want to interact with me more, you can go and follow me on Twitter. I post frequently over there about my opinions in the gaming space, and I'd be happy to see you. Now, if I haven't earned your sub yet, that is totally fine. You can go and watch this video, and hopefully it will change your mind. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.